Welcome to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. We have a ton of news to get to, so I'm going to get started with our first topic, which is a little bit of a dissection of a conversation that happened on The View today. So the worldwide coronavirus pandemic has threatened the lives of millions of Americans. At this point, thousands of Americans have already lost their lives, and we have a very vulnerable healthcare system where 27 million Americans do not have access to healthcare. More than 3 million people have filed for unemployment. They've been laid off. They've lost their jobs. And so there's a big question about what we need to do about fixing our healthcare system. And the ladies of The View thought it would be a good idea to have Bernie Sanders on, which I agree with. Great guest. Here is how they decided to bring that segment in. Take a look.
How does presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders answer accusations that he's politicizing the pandemic to push his Medicare for All agenda and that staying in the race could guarantee Trump another term? He's live on The View. Next.
Someone pays her to sound like that. Next.
No, I think it's permanent. It's just baked in now.
What was that? What was that?
Disdain. Like it was a jar overflowing with disdain is what it was.
Every argument against single payer has been completely and utterly demolished by what this country is going through right now. The nonsense propaganda about how people love their employer provided insurance. Oh, really? Do all those laid off people right now enjoy the fact that they're not insured? Do they enjoy that they probably got a letter in the mail telling them that they can pay an exorbitant amount for Cobra? This is absurd. This is the most absurd way of teasing the audience about an upcoming interview on the show.
I think that everyone in the audience should recognize what's going on right now. Anna Kasparian is politicizing coronavirus to push your Medicare for All agenda. I mean,
so they're saying you're not allowed to talk about fixing a broken system, which we are currently suffering the consequences of right now. Mm-hmm. Right now. You're not allowed to discuss any solutions for it because that would be politicizing it.
I mean, if you wanted to talk about the link between these two things, which, first of all, Bernie definitely wants to talk about that link, and it's perfectly reasonable. If you're going to bring him on, you're going to talk to him about coronavirus, and he believes that the policies he's been advocating for would have put us in a far better position to deal with it, would have saved lives. How about just say Bernie Sanders believes that single-payer healthcare would have helped America weather the pandemic? We'll discuss next on The View. Like, that would be a perfectly reasonable thing. But to pitch it as, how does he respond to accusations? And is he just trying to get Trump elected? To do it on both of those things implies that the only reason they're bringing him on is to try to take him down. It apparently was the only reason that they were bringing him on. And it does a disservice to the many people, even in their audience, who are probably growing increasingly interested in Medicare for All as they see what our current healthcare system is doing in a time of emergency.
So I think it's important to juxtapose what you guys just saw with the way the very fine producers over at The View treat other individuals. Okay, so let's take a look at the next video.
Future shock.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead.
The president gives his most candid take on the possible death toll from the coronavirus.
They're very sobering. You know, when you see 100,000 people, that's at a minimum number.
He's hearing the worst case scenario, the wake-up call America needs right now. Plus, presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders is live on The View. Why he's not dropping out of the race and says the pandemic proves American healthcare is broken and he's the man to fix it.
So it's interesting. That last part with Bernie was fine. And actually the way that they handled the Trump portion of that was fine as well, because they're not sharing like this overwhelming bias. They're not giving Trump a ton of credit. They're not, sharing any type of commentary in it. They're just explaining, hey, this is something that happened and we're going to discuss it when we come back from the break. That's the way to do it. I'm not saying that you need to say something incredibly favorable about Bernie Sanders, but accusing him of politicizing healthcare at a time when Americans are literally dying dying because of this pandemic is ridiculous. And then adding that extra layer of, is he just trying to get Trump reelected?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, I think that our audience is savvy enough that they probably, like me, just cringe at politicizing being applied to something that is obviously political. And it's the main piece of news, political or otherwise, in America, around the globe right now. Who is talking about it? Who is planning for the future of it that is not politicizing it? What does that even mean? Like, he's saying we need to institute Medicare for all. That'll help us get out of this. It'll help us in the next pandemic. If they had Joe Biden on, he'd say, no, we should just continue with the system that we have right now. 10 million people still won't be insured, even if I get elected after a few years. How is that not politicizing it to say that we should maintain the status quo rather than changing? They're all doing the same thing. They're all advocating for what they think the system should be. But Bernie Sanders is the one that's having the label of politicizing being applied to him.
So maybe some would argue, hey, that was a tease, obviously written by producers. The hosts have nothing to do with that, so let's not be too tough on the hosts. Well, the interview didn't really convince me otherwise, because the framing of the questions were telling, to say the least. You guys should all watch the full segment to get a sense of how all of the hosts handled this interview. I think Whoopi Goldberg's ridiculous pressure on Bernie to drop out is something that I wish we had enough time to talk about. But since we're on the topic of healthcare, let's go to the framing that we heard from Sunny Hostin, who has made no secret about the fact that she does not like Bernie Sanders. So just understand where this framing is coming from.
Senator, some are accusing you of using the pandemic to push Medicare for all. And they're saying, at this time, we should put politics aside and come together behind the president. What is your response to politicizing this allegation that everyone is politicizing?
Well, I don't know who is making the allegation. I have political opponents who make all kinds of accusations. But should we put politics aside and all come together? Of course we should. And when we all come together, it seems to me we have to do several things. One of them is guarantee health care to all people right now. The absurdity that you may be diagnosed with the coronavirus and you go into the hospital and you spend thousands of dollars getting treated and maybe, God willing, you come out alive, well, you got a huge bill out there. If you're being diagnosed with cancer right now, the truth is that we have 500,000 people a year who go bankrupt because of medically related bills. So let us come together. You're absolutely right. But in coming together, we got to do a couple of things. And one thing is say that especially in this crisis, people should not have to worry about the cost of health care.
I think he answered that perfectly fine. But that was the whole, tease right before they went to the segment about how he's just politicizing an issue that he's tied to. But it's such a relevant issue that would actually save people's lives. Imagine all those people who did get laid off, right? So you're worried about your livelihood, clearly, but there's that added layer of being worried about getting sick and not having the ability to pay for the treatment you need to combat coronavirus. Because while testing is free based on what Congress has done, treatment is not free. So if you don't have insurance, like the 17-year-old in Lancaster County, California, who was turned away when he went to urgent care, you are likely to die, right? That's what happened to that 17-year-old. He was turned away, he went into cardiac arrest, and he died.
Yeah, and so you're right to point out that even Trump has tried to conflate no co-payments for anything, and no, it's only for the testing, it's not for the treatment. But I want to sit down with these politicians and ask them, do you think that just because coronavirus is a big threat that people aren't getting sick from other things? I don't think people's cancer suddenly went into remission just because we have this pandemic. People who are suffering from chronic problems involving respiratory issues, their heart, all sorts of things like diabetes, all sorts of conditions like that. Those are still an issue. Those can still leave you broke and on the street, especially in a time when every week millions of Americans are losing their jobs. Maybe Sunny Hostin, maybe she was saying a question that she herself does not believe. If so, I would make that clear when I ask questions that other people are saying and that I don't believe. I always make that very clear. But the way that she described that we should put politics aside and just get behind the president. That's how somebody who's literally never thought about politics before would talk. Like, do you believe that Donald Trump is doing that? Is he putting politics aside? Is Mitch McConnell putting politics aside? And what if we had done that? What if we had done what Sonny Hostin is implying some people want a month ago? And we'd never put any pressure on Donald Trump. Where do we think he would be today? Would testing kits be sent all around the country? Would some states have begrudgingly finally gotten some ventilators from him? Would he have just gone ahead with his plan to reopen the economy on Easter? The idea that what he's making are just leadership decisions. Everyone else is doing politics. That's how babies think about politics. That's not how serious people who get paid large amounts of money to analyze politics and news should be thinking about or talking about it. Whether they themselves believe these things or not, they should be clear to their audience what's actually going on.
Well, Sonny Hostin is very much aware of what's happening in politics. She does pay attention. I actually think Sonny Hostin is a pretty intelligent person. I agree with her on some things. I completely disagree with her complete and utter disdain for Bernie Sanders and the policies that would really improve the lives of so many Americans who are struggling, not just now, but who had been struggling under a broken system. We have not been prepared at all to deal with this pandemic. And a huge reason why is because of this for-profit commoditized model of healthcare that continues to treat people who can't afford private health insurance as second-class citizens who are worthy of death. And to point to a politician who wants to change that and argue that he's just, using this to his advantage to further his agenda, first of all, he should. Okay, because his agenda matters. What he wants to do matters. And secondly, if you can't discuss solutions for a broken system now, when can you? And Bernie Sanders sure as hell should not let them intimidate him from stopping this incredibly important messaging about healthcare, because that's what they want. Okay, they want to beat him to submission. He is insanely friendly to bad faith actors, and that drives me crazy personally. But no, if we can't make the case for Medicare for all now, then there's never a time when we can make a case for Medicare for all. And I want to go to the second video featuring Sonny Hostin, because I would argue that the framing of her question here is actually much worse.
Senator Sanders, this is Sonny. You say that the coronavirus crisis proves that our for-profit healthcare system is a failure. Can you explain why your Medicare for All plan would work better in this kind of scenario?
Well, right now, there is, for two reasons. Number one, there is growing anxiety in this country that people are increasingly unable to afford health care, or that they may not have any health care at all. Right now, before the epidemic, we were looking at 87 million people who were uninsured or underinsured, and now, when millions of people are losing their jobs, they're losing their health care. What do? We have the absurd situation that the recent stimulus bill covered you for the cost of the testing that you may need for the coronavirus. It did not cover the treatment. So you've lost your job, you may not have any income, and now you're worried about health care. What Medicare for All does is not a radical idea. It does what every other major country on earth does. It guarantees health care to all of our people not tied to employment. You lose your job, you got coverage.
Again, I think he handled that right. And the reason why I disagree with her framing there is because she uses the same tactic or trick that we see in journalism all the time, which is some people say, right? And I just think that I think Sonny Hostin is better than this, right? Because think about it. She knows how many people have lost their jobs. She knows how desperately people need those stimulus checks, which is nothing. It's a tiny Band-Aid on a gushing wound. And she still thinks that it's a valid question to ask, hey, why do you think that your single payer system would be better than this for-profit model?
Yeah.
Really?
Exactly.
You're smarter than that.
Well, yeah. And so have you read the Write-Ups by Doctors analysis of how, in general, countries that have systems like this are weathering this better? Have you, I can make the case, certainly. Bernie Sanders, I can make the case. But if you're that interested in it, you could read about it, and then maybe you could bring that up or bring some of those academics or doctors onto the show to make the case as well. If you want to put politics aside, which is a great thing to do in the middle of a primary election, I think. Maybe we put it aside for like 6 months. We just rally behind the president until he gets his second term. Obviously absurd. If I was Bernie Sanders too, I would, again, I don't know exactly what Sunny Hostin or any of the other hosts on The View think about what should be done in terms of coronavirus. But I would say, look, a lot of Americans think that it's incredibly immoral that just because someone gets infected with coronavirus, that if they can't afford to get tested, they shouldn't be tested, or that if they indeed have it, that just because they can't afford to be treated, they shouldn't be treated. Should we let people die on the streets of coronavirus? And I assume that they would say, no, that's incredibly immoral. And I would say, okay, well, then why should we let that happen with the regular flu or with diabetes or with thyroid cancer? Why would we let this happen with literally anything? We are being like people who have not thought about this, about radically remaking the way healthcare is provided in America. They're being wakened up to how obviously immoral it is to let people die through no fault of their own. Now, let's just widen things just a little bit and realize that it is just as evil to let people die because of lack of resources from literally any other health problem.
Yeah, and some people might argue, hey, it's The View, don't get too frustrated with it. It's just a daytime show. But all of this propaganda, unfortunately, does have some influence. And it seeps into social media. It seeps into conversations that average Americans are having. I'll give you an example because you mentioned morality, John. And I believe that it's immoral to allow people to die if they don't have the means to pay for private insurance. Today, Alyssa Milano tweeted, "It is intellectually bankrupt for Bernie to pretend that not unifying the party today is advantageous to a Democratic victory in November. He's still taking donations from people during crisis on a campaign that has no path forward." Mind you, I mean, we haven't finished the primaries yet. So to say that there's no path forward, is it going to be difficult? Yes. But, was there any pressure for Warren to drop out early, right? She dropped out when she was comfortable doing it. And anyone who tried to pressure her to drop out was completely criticized, lambasted. And with Bernie, it's okay, you need to drop out. And then she says it's intellectually and morally bankrupt. I think it's intellectually and morally bankrupt to support a candidate who has credible sexual assault allegations against him, sexual assault allegations which the media refuses to acknowledge, even though they jump on any and all sexual assault allegations when it has to do with individuals they dislike. Okay, I think that it's morally bankrupt to be supportive of a candidate who was just asked on MSNBC whether he thinks a single-payer healthcare system would have been better for this country in the middle of this pandemic. And he said, no, I don't think it would have fixed anything. And, that's what he had to say, considering all those people who had an employer provided health insurance plan are now left to either pay for COBRA, which no one can pay for, or just not have any health insurance at a time when we don't have anything protecting us from the cost of treatment for COVID-19. I think that's morally bankrupt.
I agree.
All right. We got to take a break. We'll be back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Hey guys, welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. As some of you might already know, TYT is doing a fundraiser to help keep us sustainable. This was actually a fundraiser we started before the coronavirus pandemic became so serious that people were quarantined. And so we totally understand the financial pressures and stress that people are under. And so we want to make sure that you guys take care of yourselves first, take care of your families. However, if you are able to help support this show, especially during this difficult time, it would be greatly appreciated because, you know, clearly based on the types of topics we discuss, we are definitely reliant on our audience in order to keep us afloat. So we started this goal of raising $2 million by the end of the year, and we have already raised $237,000 because you guys are incredible. And so there's just a lot of generosity out there that I'm so grateful for. Thank you for keeping us alive.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
awesome.
John. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm very surprised. As I've mentioned a couple times on the damage report, like if we're doing our job and talking about the most important news right now, that means it is very difficult to actually receive any sort of ad revenue, which is obviously a big part of what keeps our company in existence. And I mean, we can switch to talking about stuff that is ad friendly, that has nothing to do with what's actually ravaging our country. But we feel like we should stick to the news. And thankfully, we have members and people who are going to support us while we do that.
Definitely. So if you're interested in contributing, you can go to tyt.com/go, tyt.com/go. It's incredible. And for the month of April, so the goal is to raise $200,000 each month. And for the month of April, we're already up to $37,861. Again, you guys are just amazing. And I don't know, I get really emotional talking about it because, you know, there's just like so much cruelty in the world right now. And you watch those press briefings that Trump does and you see how he exploits it for his own political agenda and his own reelection campaign. And you're just like, wow, people just don't care about people. But the audience always reminds me that there are a lot of good people out there. So thank you. Okay, with that said, I wanted to update you guys on some really important polling that Morning Consult did on Medicare for All. So let's get right to it. Right now, there are so many Americans who are beyond worried about their future, both financially and when it comes to their health. And that's because a lot of people just got laid off and will be losing their employer-provided health insurance. And so, unsurprisingly, we're seeing a significant increase of voters who feel that Medicare for All is the right solution to this problem. And those results are definitely shown in this recent Morning Consult poll. They found that 55% of voters support Medicare for All, and that's the highest level since June of 2019, when 54% backed the plan. From February to March, net support for single-payer healthcare jumped from 11 points to 20 points. And where is this support coming from? Well, it's coming from the very voters the Democratic Party needs to attract in order to win the election. Independent voters. Independents helped fuel Medicare for All's rise in March with an 8-point uptick in net support. And by the way, for those of you who think, I don't like change. I want to keep the system the way it is. 27 million Americans uninsured before the pandemic. Now millions more uninsured because they've been laid off. That sounds fine and dandy to me. Except this is a devastating burden on our healthcare system, the coronavirus is. And based on a recent study that was done by California Covered, they found that health insurance premiums could increase as much as 40% next year due to this pandemic. Something to keep in mind.
And, you know, I mean, Donald Trump, obviously, if he does anything in regards to healthcare going forward, it will be to, again, attempt to repeal the ACA and put us back to, 2007 or whatever. And Joe Biden is saying, like, maybe we strengthen it a little bit. But no, it's still millions and millions of people won't have health insurance. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that in a time where people are thinking about their health care, and what the future of their insurance is going to be like, even for those who haven't lost their jobs, they might be thinking, well, okay, my company is keeping me employed, but will that last for 2 weeks? Will it last for 2 months? It certainly isn't going to last if this is 18 months. So they're worried about the future too. And so they're changing, which is probably a result of, I don't know, using the Views logic, the coronavirus has politicized itself to push for its Medicare for all agenda. But no, like, for whatever reason, I'm glad to see it. This is the most salient issue. It already was, but it's far more salient. All the more reason that we need to have a vigorous debate inside of the Democratic primary between people with very different ideas of what the future of American healthcare should be.
Exactly. So right now, the ball is in the Democratic establishment's court. They have more and more evidence indicating that the very voters that they need to attract in order to win re-election and defeat Donald Trump want Medicare for all. So the question is, are they going to help Donald Trump win his re-election by ignoring the desires of American voters? That's my question to the Democratic establishment. I would like Nancy Pelosi to answer that question. I would like to hear what the answer is from the fine ladies at The View with their incredibly intellectual political commentary and analysis. I want to know, is the Democratic Party going to do what it takes to defeat Donald Trump? Are they going to listen to the voters, or are they going to listen to their corporate donors?
Yeah. And look, right now, I know you just published your most recent op-ed in The Hill, which is absolutely awesome. Everyone should go take a look at it. I'm working on one too, which is basically, does Joe Biden even want to be president? And the reason I'm asking that is because, like, the issue that is dominating the news now, and that is almost certainly going to be dominating the vast majority of people's thinking about whether they should stick with Trump or whether they should change it up, is going to be the coronavirus and, hypothetically, whatever we do to recover from it. And he's saying he doesn't want to get into a political fight with Trump about it. So he's effectively yielding all that ground. And as more and more of the population, including the independents that they say they want so badly, are interested in policies that he's not interested in, and in fact has said that he would veto if they made it to his desk, I don't know what else he can do to signal that as the political context changes, he was always going to have a rough time. But now it's looking like he's going to effectively do nothing to adapt to the way that things are changing. And if you are a Biden supporter, or if you just hate Trump and want to see him replaced, this should be terrifying you on a daily basis, how much ground he's ceded to Donald Trump already.
100%. Well, let's move on to some of the other naysayers when it comes to Medicare for all. And this is an important story. Now is the time to push for something that the majority of Americans want. So we're going to stay on it. So yesterday, I was shocked to learn that some members of the Democratic establishment and even Kamala Harris supporters do not believe that Kamala Harris's mother, who tragically died from cancer, deserved to receive treatment and care free at the point of service. I was shocked to see that, because I would think that they would have enough empathy to understand the importance of providing free health care to someone who is suffering from something as devastating as cancer. So how did I find out about this? Well, it all started with a tweet from Kamala Harris herself. She tweeted the following, and I agree with her on this: testing for coronavirus and treatment needs to be free, period. Now, that's a perfectly fine point to bring up. It absolutely should be free, especially considering how many Americans were uninsured prior to the pandemic and how many more millions and millions of Americans will now be uninsured because they've been laid off as a result of the pandemic. So Brianna Joy Gray, who is the national press secretary for Bernie Sanders, quote tweeted her and said the following: "This is a good start. But is it okay to die from cancer or diabetes because you're poor?" So she's asking a very legitimate question about how every life is precious, every life matters, and we shouldn't just cherry pick when the treatment is free. We should make this available to all Americans regardless of their income. But members of the Democratic establishment apparently don't think that it's a good idea for someone suffering from cancer to get free service at the point of care. And I'll give you some examples. There was Brian Michael Scully. He's a screenwriter in Los Angeles who is supportive of Elizabeth Warren. He tweeted the following: "What the legitimate F is wrong with you?" That's what he had tweeted.
This is at Brianna Joy Gray.
Yes, this is at Brianna Joy Gray. I mean, there was an insane amount of hate directed toward her. So then you have Kim, who's a producer at Intertheory. She tweeted, "Please, I beg of you to reconsider your priorities. Destroying the Democratic Party ain't it, said with love." What?
I think the priority is not having people die because they're poor. That seems like a pretty good priority. I thought we all shared that, actually.
I mean, it got so incredibly vicious. Zerlina Maxwell, who worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign and is now, a pundit on MSNBC, said, "The tone of this tweet is mean and disrespectful, especially considering Kamala's mother died from cancer." I think it's mean and disrespectful to make an argument that, allowing people to get the treatment that they need to stay alive without worrying about the cost is out of the question and should be criticized. The things that they were throwing at her, if you want to look for yourselves, I just like a dark hole of negativity, threats about her job prospects after, the primaries. It was gross to say the least.
Yeah, part of it is that they disagree with her on this, and part of it is she's a representative for Bernie Sanders, and so she thinks, well, I'm not actually that offended, but if I can act like I am, if I can take her down, then that'll hurt Bernie Sanders too. Maybe I can get him to disavow her. Maybe I can get him to fire her. Wouldn't that be amazing? And the bringing up that Kamala's mother died of cancer, is that supposed to so now you're disqualified from bringing it up? Okay, well then by that theory, my dad died of cancer. I give Brianna a credit now or ability to talk about it. Okay, we've canceled out the 2 parent deaths due to cancer. I mean, I remember my dad, for the couple of years as he was suffering and dying from thyroid cancer, continually plagued with medical bills that he had to deal with. It would have been amazing if the last couple of years of his life had been freed from that additional source of stress that he desperately did not need. So we've now canceled that out. Brianna, go ahead and advocate for people who are struggling with paying for their medical bills again. The whole thing is absolutely absurd. I want no one to get coronavirus. I want no one to die from coronavirus. Coronavirus is a massive threat. But there's no moral reason, there's no ethical reason why you should make the testing and the treatment free and then be viciously opposed to the idea that someone who has, sarcoidosis should also get free testing or for treatment, or no, we're not just going to help you if you get something that's trendy and impending. We want to protect you. We have the resources to protect you. We know from recent weeks, we have unlimited money to spend on what we actually prioritize. Maybe we could start prioritizing people's lives, and especially those who up until now have had far less resources than some of the people attacking Brianna.
What I don't understand is, do the people who go after supporters of Medicare for All as viciously as they do, stop and really think about what they're fighting against, right? Because while they're pretending to be outraged at Brianna Joy Gray, what they need to really reflect on, because this is now out in the public, they have put this out in the public, they are loudly declaring to the rest of the world, if you support a healthcare system that provides care to every single person, regardless of their income, we are against you. We don't think that lives are valuable, and we will fight you. We will intimidate you. So I'll give you an example of what kind of intimidation Brianna Joy Gray is dealing with as well. By the way, these are from the very people who go off in a corner and cry somewhere because they think that they've been bullied by Bernie Sanders supporters on Twitter. Okay. In the meantime, though, they're threatening Brianna Joy Gray's livelihood. So one of those tweets was from Shermichael. Let's take a look at this. He tweeted the following: "We've both been in politics long enough to know that this person is putting herself in a very bad position for future opportunities. I hope she knows exactly what she's doing, because making unnecessary enemies is a fool's errand." And then Bakari Sellers responded with the following: "We remember."
Oh my God.
No, that's what they're willing to threaten people with if the individuals they're threatening are supportive of a single payer healthcare system. That's out there. That's out in the open.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, she might not get brought into MSNBC or something. I think she's aware of that. I think that she is doing what she thinks she needs to do to move the country to where it needs to be. There are a lot of people that you can come at and say, are you actually following your values and advocating for the policies that you're advocating for? I know that you think you are, but are you actually doing that? I think that she should probably get a pass in this one. I think that she knows what she's doing.
No, she should be applauded. She didn't, but by the way, she said cancer and diabetes. She wasn't trying to make a point about Kamala Harris's mom. And had she tried to make the point about Kamala Harris's mom, she's literally arguing that Kamala Harris's mom shouldn't have to worry about exorbitant medical fees as she's suffering from cancer. What is wrong with these people? Like, this is what we're up against, guys. This is what we're up against. So this like nonsense about capitulating with establishment Democrats who are so far up their own corrupt asses that they don't care about your lives. It's a ridiculous notion. This idea that if we're just friendlier to them, if we're just nicer to them, that they're going to work with us and actually pass the policies that people desperately need in this country to live. It's the most absurd idea ever. And right now is the time for progressives to fight. Right now, not tomorrow, not when the pandemic is over, not when countless Americans die already because the system has failed them. Now is the time, okay? Nancy Pelosi, not your friend. Bakari Seller, not your friend. Mainstream media, not your friend. Know your enemies and fight. If you're not willing to do it, then shut up and stop pretending like you actually give a damn about these policies. We'll be right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Had a nice little break. Took a little sip of my drink. Not an alcoholic drink, just like a little bit of LaCroix. And I'm feeling good now. I'm feeling okay. I just needed to cool off a little bit. All right. Well, I want to get to as many stories as possible. So let's move on to what Trump's been up to, especially when it comes to healthcare. So as the number of coronavirus-related deaths increases in the United States, and the number of people testing positive also increases along with updated news, unfortunately, we're learning that Donald Trump isn't willing to give Americans even an inch when it comes to healthcare coverage in order to help them treat this virus, combat the virus. And so there's been like a growing number of people who have been urging him to open up a window of time for special healthcare enrollment. So people who aren't insured at least have the ability to spend too much money on our private healthcare system. I mean, it's literally the least he could do. And he's refusing to do that. So before I give you his response to all of this, I do think it's important to highlight how Trump is very well aware of the dire situation we're in because he talked about it recently. Take a look.
You're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel, but this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks. When you look and see at night the kind of death that's been caused by this invisible enemy, it's incredible. I was watching last night Governor Murphy of New Jersey say 29 people died today, meaning yesterday, and others talking about numbers far greater. But you get to know a state. I know New Jersey so well, and you hear 29 people.
So he knows that this is a devastating situation where people are dying, and our lack of preparedness, especially when it comes to our broken healthcare system, is a big issue. So why not make it a little tiny incrementally better by at least allowing people who didn't enroll in healthcare during the open enrollment period to just be able to do so during a special enrollment period? And he's saying, no, not interested.
Yeah, I think you called it literally the least he could do. Yeah, it's just about the least. It's to just give people a little bit of a chance to get health insurance. But no, he is an ideological monster. That's what he is. He hates the ACA more than he hates the idea of people dying unnecessarily from coronavirus. There's no other explanation for it. He's still it's still lurking in the background in his mind, in the minds of other Republicans, that they still really wish that they could get rid of Obamacare if they could. I mean, they tried. They gave it the old college try during his first year, and unfortunately for them, they were stopped. But no, they still want to do it. And I know that yesterday he acknowledged the people that are dying and how many are going to die. And, I'm supposed to be super impressed with him like a bunch of people in national media were. I'm not, because those numbers are higher than they need to be, because he's effectively sat on his ass, twiddling his thumbs as weeks and weeks and weeks go by. He could just pick up the phone and call DeSantis yesterday and do a statewide lockdown. Do it a week ago. Do it 3 weeks ago. Many people wouldn't have gotten coronavirus that will now, because it took until today for DeSantis to finally do it. He couldn't have put pressure on those Republican governors. He couldn't have put some sort of directive for a national lockdown and put some kind of either economic pressure or at least media pressure on states to do that. No, he's crying completely fake tears. He's been pretending that this was a big, made-up, exaggerated plot of the media from the very beginning. He has contributed to the number of cases and the number of deaths. I'm mostly disinterested in what he thinks about this at this point. I do care about his actions, and unfortunately, those still continue to disappoint.
But, John, he really did have a somber tone in that presser, and everything else that he's done wrong should be forgotten about and wiped away, because he's such a great leader now, except he's not. I mean, it doesn't matter what his tone is. What matters is he conveying accurate information that helps keep people safe? Has he ceased using these pressers as a way to rally for his reelection? Mm-hmm. And more importantly, what are his actions? What has he actually done to help protect people in the middle of this pandemic? And not only is he refusing to open that window of time for special enrollment, Politico is also reporting that Trump also doubled down on his support of a lawsuit by Republican states that could destroy the entire Affordable Care Act. Okay, so also along with coverage for 20 million more people who are insured through the law. So right now we have 27 million uninsured Americans, even with the Affordable Care Act. If he gets his way and he repeals the Affordable Care Act, you're going to add another 20 million to that number. And I'm not even including the number of people who have been laid off recently because of the pandemic, millions and millions of people who also just lost their health insurance. So this is a catastrophic situation. And I have to say, I'm definitely happy that the ladies of The View really focused on saying terrible things about Medicare for All and Bernie Sanders, rather than focusing on stories like this, where our leader, the president of the United States, is making it incredibly difficult for people to get the health care and the coverage they need to survive the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, this crisis has had the potential tiny silver lining of making clear to people who didn't already know how inequitable our system was in so many different ways, how abused and ignored the needs of most in the working class, but especially in people in areas that are now seen as incredibly crucial, because people need access to products, they need access to medical care. These are the sorts of people that are ignored, when a pandemic isn't going on. People are being awoken to the inequities in the system, and there are people like the hosts of The View that are doing everything they can to stay asleep.
Let's talk about prison. First off, this story is not in the rundown, but I do want to let the audience know that prisoners at Rikers Island have been offered to get paid $6 an hour in order to dig mass graves for bodies, people who have died because of COVID-19. So that's happening. We're in a great situation. Let's talk about how great Trump's tone is. But there is one other prison-related story that I wanted to talk about today. And Kelly Loeffler, an appointed senator in Georgia, is very much at the center of this. So let's do it. Appointed Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler, who is accused of insider trading following a classified Senate briefing on the severity of COVID-19 back in January, has just disclosed more information about her stocks, what she dumped, what she purchased after receiving incredibly important insider information on COVID-19. So Earlier, we had shared this story about how she and her husband, who is the chair of the New York Stock Exchange, dumped a bunch of stock earlier this year, immediately after she had that Senate briefing. This latest filing is a little later than that, but a lot of the stocks that she dumped were still prior to the general public knowing and really understanding the severity of COVID-19. So the Atlanta Journal-Constitution did a great story on this with more details, but let me share some of them with you. The largest transactions, they write, and the most politically problematic, involve $18.7 million in sales of Intercontinental Exchange stock in 3 separate deals dated February 26th and March 11th. Loeffler is a former executive with the Intercontinental Exchange. So you see ICE in the graphic, but it's not the ICE that we're thinking of when it comes to immigration. And her husband, Jeff Sprecher, is the CEO of the company, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, among other financial marketplaces. The couple also sold shares in retail stores, which certainly have been hit by this pandemic, such as Lululemon and TJ Maxx, and invested in a company that makes COVID-19 protective garments. Interesting. There's more, but John, I want you to jump in.
Yeah, every added detail makes it harder to believe the cover story that they have come up with. I mean, I understand she's incredibly wealthy. That's sort of the defense. We sell millions of dollars in stock all the time. I don't even know about it. That's how much money I have. Fortunes come and go every day. They tell me about it months later. I don't know. So that's what we're supposed to believe. Hey, maybe it's true, but it sure does seem coincidental that a bunch of senators engaged in what seem like incredibly strategic both buys and sells directly related to the industries that are going to be hurt and those that are going to potentially profit. Not necessarily that did profit, but those that it would be reasonable to assume would. I think for regular people, that is incredibly hard to believe. And that's why there needs to be an investigation. She's released a few financial disclosure documents. No, we need people to look into the communications between her and her husband and whoever is actually managing these trades. If she actually communicated with them, especially in the immediate aftermath of that classified briefing, then there's probably some sort of documented trail that we can find, and that would severely undercut the story that she's trying to spin.
Absolutely. Look, as always, of course, we have a justice system, and, on Twitter and social media, I'll usually refer to stories like this and I'll say prison, right? Because based on the evidence that we have in front of us right now, she sure as hell looks guilty. But of course, we have the justice system for a reason, and she should have her day in court, along with all the other senators who have been implicated in this. So Richard Burr is part of this. There's some indication that Senator Inhofe also dumped some stocks. All of these cases are a little different from one another. Dianne Feinstein apparently dumped some stocks. We don't know if every single one of them is guilty. What we do know is that there's some suspicious behavior, suspicious activity in their trading immediately following that Senate briefing. And so I think that it makes all the sense in the world to do this investigation. And by the way, just to give you some more detail into what this couple purchased, they apparently bought $206,774 in chemical giant DuPont, 4 transactions in late February and early March. Now, DuPont has performed poorly on Wall Street lately, but the company is a major supplier of desperately needed personal protective gear as the global pandemic strains hospitals and first responders.
Yeah. Huge coincidence.
Just a big coincidence.
It is insane. It is insane that they can own stock and they can trade in stock. I was talking about it with JR in the morning. Like, if you bring up the possibility that someone who they want you to believe they're serving their country as a senator or as a representative, the idea that they should not be able to own stock, people be like, oh my God, seriously? You expect them to sacrifice that much while they're serving our country? Even though we make massive restrictions on what people in the armed forces can do while they're serving their country, they give up all sorts of rights. But senators who are given incredible amounts of power and privilege and will definitely be rich for the rest of their lives, lobbying jobs and all that, we can't temporarily stop them from trading stocks while they're in office. We don't let athletes bet on games they play in. You know why? Because even though the stakes are really, really, really low, we know that theoretically some of them might want to influence the outcome. It is reasonable to assume that if someone can make money by influencing the outcome of something, they're going to do that. She's been in the Senate for like a couple of months. I don't extend any trust to her. Okay. No, like if you can make decisions, if you can pass legislation that'll affect stock prices, that bothers me. The entire idea that Mnuchin is going to be able to hand out huge quantities of money, you don't think he's going to personally profit off of that, knowing what stocks are likely to skyrocket after the government hands them dozens of billions of dollars? And no, I don't trust her any more than him.
Yeah, 100%. And just to give you a little bit of a positive update to this story, because look, I really want people to stop having this like defeatist mentality, because I see a lot of people on social media saying, well, they're senators, they're above the law, so there's no use fighting them on this. No, we need to apply pressure. I don't think Americans understand how powerful a collectivist movement can really be. And luckily, there's been enough pushback that the FEC is looking into this to some extent. So I'm sorry, the FTC. So the investigators have actually reached out to Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, who along with Loeffler has faced widespread criticism about stock trading. Transactions made by the U.S. Senators David Perdue of Georgia, Dianne Feinstein of California, and Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma were also criticized, but to a lesser extent. As I said earlier, each case is a little different, right? So the reason why I focus so much on Kelly Loeffler is because her actions, basically, in addition to the fact that she's married with the chair of the New York Stock Exchange, make her case particularly egregious.
Yeah. Yeah, although you know, I'm it's good of you to point out the differences between all of these. But you know what? Just to be safe, let's ban them all from owning stocks. That should cover everyone's
totally
concerns,
agree.
I think. And barring that, an investigation and possibly prison.
Definitely. Because it's not, public servant isn't like a suggested title, right? You're called a public servant because you're meant to serve. It's a duty that you have signed up for. But that job title has become so corrupted that people just see dollar signs. And right now, we need leaders who actually want to represent us. And keep in mind, Senator Loeffler was not elected. She was appointed. And it's because she can't win based on her own merits. Anyway, we got to go. That's it. That's the show. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.